Arielle, your game of the week was Norfolk State versus Delaware State at the Link in Philadelphia. It was a lot going on, Arielle. What were your thoughts on this game?
Listen, what a great time to be in Philly. I really listen. If I could have seen that game in person live, that would have been great than sitting at home and watching it on my TV screen. But I especially wasn't thinking that this game was going to be as close as it was, because as we've been bragging on them and seeing, and no, factually, Delaware State is the better team. But to let Norfolk State come this close, probably because Otto Coons was playing, this was a game that you definitely had to watch. It was a better game than what I expected. Ultimately, Delaware State winning 27-20. What was really weird is that Norfolk State was really holding on to that defense, even though Delaware State was much better, only allowing Norfolk State to have 45 yards in rushing yards. That is outrageous to me. But outside of that, out of only containing them to 45 yards, you would think that Norfolk State played as the better team. As they both came down to the wire, it came down to into the 6 minutes in the fourth quarter that Delaware State decided to score a touchdown, now being 14-27. Otto Coons coming back in the last 54 seconds, making a touchdown, but they couldn't get the onside kick, nor could they try to maintain that possession, leading to Delaware State's win that day. But Otto Coons looking really, really good. 22 out of 34, 3 touchdowns. That one interception is, I think, something that he probably wanted to get back. Other than that, you seeing King only having 5 carries, ultimately adding to those 45 yards that Delaware State held them to. Caden Bennett was, even though he looks great and you could see on his paper look great, 16 out of 18, 1 touchdown, wasn't the best performance that I've seen from him throughout this whole season. I think he was, I don't know if it was nerves. I don't know if it's going in how we just had literally this 8-minute debate about who's going to make it to the Celebration Bowl. I don't know if he's locked in about not losing to the rest of the teams that actually matter in this conference outside of Morgan State, outside of South Carolina State, and outside of North Carolina Central, who they have already beaten. But this game, to me, he just looked unpoised. He looked rattled, and it's something that we're not used to, especially they have a nice line. It's a good line to play against Norfolk State. It's not something that you really had to worry about. But the 21 first downs and not missing a couple of those balls, not converting on third downs, just his head didn't look right in the game. But also, when you see that Delaware State have most of the possession, having 32 minutes of possessions, but only having no conversions on fourth down, which is crazy. This would be one of 2 games that they haven't had conversions on fourth downs. Only 6 out of 13 attempts when it did come to third down. This team to me kind of lowered their standards against Norfolk State. I don't know if it's because they're finally both meeting. It's the battle against the 2 first-time head coaches that are ex-NFL pros. I don't know what that was about. But this, to me, it was a great game, but wasn't the game that I was aspiring to watch, just because I was thinking more of like a Buddy Pugh, not Buddy Pugh, a Chennis Berry kind of Norfolk State blowout. But that's not what it gave me. Overall, it was an amazing game. And what they do now have to watch for, since everybody's beating their opponent, South Carolina State being Morgan State last week, then you have Central being Howard, they have to decisively win their next games. This can't be, I'm rattled in the pocket, I'm going to play down to, you can't play down to Chennis Berry. You definitely can't play down to Howard. This is something that Caden Bennett is going to have to get. Overall, I'm glad with the performance. I'm glad I got this game and that it was more of a game than a blowout, because we were talking real smack last week. But congratulations to DeSean Jackson. He's really doing a great job at Delaware State, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen for the rest of the 3 games that we do have left.
I agree. I think DeSean Jackson is doing an amazing job. And I think that one of the reasons why DeSean Jackson is doing an amazing job is what you saw from this game on the field. What DeSean Jackson has figured out, and him and his coaching staff have figured out, is their identity. And their identity is being that rough-nosed, run-the-ball type team. Like, you're not going to get them off their square, and you're not going to stop them from running the ball. And that opens up so many things when it comes to the RPO, when it comes to different trick plays. Like, it opens up the field to so many different things that they can do. what you see is the difference with Norfolk State is they don't have an identity. And they're not leaning into their strength, because you talked about Kevon King only having so many carries, not having an effective game, even though we understand he's one of the best running backs in the MEAC. The problem is that their passing game is really their strength. Now, if you remember, Arielle, for the folks that didn't hear it last week, I told you that Otto Coombs was going to have over 300 yards, and he did. And the reason why I knew he would is because Delaware State's secondary is just simply not good. That's something that we all know. And that's something that they're going to have to correct when it comes into the offseason. Their offense is so great, and they have such a high-powered offense that dominates the time of possession. You don't have a lot of opportunity to try to get back in the game because they're running the ball, because they're getting first downs, because they're not throwing 50, 60-yard passes all the time. They're grinding you down, and sometimes you'll get a 70-yard run, but like you're normally getting 5 yards a pop, 10 yards a pop, 3 yards a pop, and you're just dominating that time of possession. So the offense doesn't have a lot of opportunities. But I knew if Norfolk State had those opportunities, they would capitalize. But my thing is that you saw at the beginning of that game that Michael Vick and that coaching staff still kept trying to run the ball. That is not your identity. And you've not opened up the run game. You just simply not open it up. Pass the ball, get them spread out, and then from there, run with Kevon King, run with your running backs. But you have two of the best receivers in almost HBCU football that are not being utilized. They were sitting up there with Michael Vick at the press conference after the game. That was the crazy thing about it, is you got them sitting up there with you at the link, but they're not getting featured enough. So, I mean, I think that that's really the story of this game. You're seeing the tale once again of two celebrity coaches, two former NFL players. One is a legend that does not know what his identity is, and you have one Eagles legend that understands that they have to run the ball. They have to make things happen in that way. They have to get down and dirty, and ultimately, that's what's going to help them succeed in the MEAC. I honestly do believe, I don't think that Norfolk State would have won, but from what I saw, especially in the first half, if Norfolk State had a vision to air the ball out, a more air raid attack, I honestly do believe that it actually would have been close, because the game wasn't as close as the score makes you think. Because if you look at that third quarter, that interception that Otto Coombs threw, that was in the end zone, that interception, and then that big run, like, there was like the game was 27-13. Like, in my mind, the box score says 27-20, but in my mind, I'm like 27-13, because like that last touchdown meant nothing to me. It meant nothing to me because they were not going to come back. They were not going to tie the game. They weren't going to win. It looked like what Norfolk State has looked like this whole entire year. And I think the lesson here for me is that Michael Vick needs to figure out his identity. Is he going to get an athletic quarterback that can throw, that can run? Is he going to have a run game that's crazy? Are we going to have an air raid attack? Are we going to do pro style? Michael Vick has to figure it out, because if you don't figure out your identity and then practice what that identity is through that preseason he keeps talking about before the MEAC games, you're never going to be successful in the MEAC, and we want him to be successful. So he has to figure that out.
But do you want